everybody, Ellen here. Today I come to you guys with a new video in sort of a new angle. So this is actually my TBR card, and today I thought I would go through my adult fantasy TBR. So hopefully everything is right here on these two upper sort of shelves, and hopefully I haven't accidentally put it in between the YA, because I've noticed several times I just go straight there and push everything in, even though I know it's supposed to be on this shelf. But yeah, let's talk about some adult fantasy. So we're going to start with the three books that were actually not on this card, because I'm currently reading one, kind of, and then the other two were just on a different shelf altogether for a different reason. Anyways, the first one is The Fellowship of the Ring by Rf Tolkien. This is the first book in the Lord of the Rings, basically. And I did read this book once, like 14 years ago or something like that, but I wanted to reread it because why not? I'm actually on page 110, and then I put it down like 3 months ago. I haven't picked it up again, which is embarrassing because I'm really enjoying it. But yeah, need to get on with it. But everybody knows what Lord of the Rings is about, so I'm not even going to go into it. And then we have The Blinding Knife by Brent Weeks. This is the second book in the Lightbringer series. I know there's been some discussions on whether it's young adult or adult, but I just think that it reads like adult, at least when I read the first book, so I'm just gonna stay here for that reason. But in the first book we meet Gavin, and he sort of has this magical abilities that he uses different colors for magic or something like that, and he's the only one that can use all of the colors because nobody else can do that, so it makes him really powerful. And that's the best way I can describe it, since I read the book like 4 years ago and I've forgotten everything. But yeah, I really enjoyed the first book, so I really need to read this one. And then we have City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty, which is a very beloved, like, sort of historical fantasy that I still haven't picked up, but everybody else has basically read it. And this is a trilogy, and I think it's called the City of Brass trilogy. I have no idea. And the only thing I know about it is that it's historical fantasy. So let's check it out. Okay, so this takes place in the markets of the 18th century Cairo. There's thieves, tricksters, con artists, and outcasts that eke out a living, swindling rich nobles and foreign invaders alike. But alongside this new world, the old stories linger. Tales of jinn and spirits, of cities hidden among swirling sands of the desert, full of enchantment, desire, and riches, where magic pours down every street, hang in the air like dust, and so on and so forth. And it sounds really interesting, and I really want to read it. And holy crap, it's warm in here. Okay, and then we have this bad boy, and this is Jade City by Fonda Lee. Everybody seems to like this series as well. I don't really know that much about it. I just know that you can basically have powers with the help of different, like, stones and stuff. Like the stone enhances a warrior's natural strength and speed, and basically that's where all the money is, and power. So I really need to read this one. I'm gonna say that about every book on this list though, so like, keep up. And now we actually have a series I want to reread, because I did listen to the audiobooks of the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. I did really enjoy the first book, but then after that I just sort of had a hard time getting the sort of world and the magic system and everything into my head, and that's just not, it just wasn't the best way for me to like get into the story and everything like that. And I definitely feel like I would have enjoyed it a lot more if I read it physically. So I found the entire series, basically, I think, in my parents' attic that my brother read when he was younger, so I was allowed to bring them home. So this is, I think this is supposed to be like the first book split up into two. So they call this one Tidens Jul and Farornas väg. So basically there's 5 youngsters that have been they've been tracked down, and they're trying to figure out, like, one, why are their monsters tracking them, 2, how the hell they're supposed to survive to the next day, and 3, figure out what the hell is going on. So I really enjoyed the first book, like I said, but I just need to reread the series because I lost it because of the audiobooks. And then we have this big hunker. So this is the rest of the Lord of the Rings series. I have read all of these, but I just need to reread them. So we have, well, that was The Hobbit. And then we have The Two Towers. And we have The Return of the King. Very beautifully illustrated by Alan Lee, by the way. So my plan is to reread them. I have read The Hobbit as well. But that was also a really long time ago, so I'm planning to reread it. And then we have the Silmarillion by Grr Tolkien. This one I haven't read, but I really do need to. And this takes place before the Lord of the Rings, so this is basically like Elrond and people that, you know, have lived forever, so basically elves, and the war before the Lord of the Rings stories, basically. And I really need to read this one. And then we have the third and final book in, I wanna say, the Poppy War trilogy. I don't know. This is The Burning God by Rf Kwang. I had book 1 and 2 on my shelves forever. And then I ended up reading the first one, freaking loved it. Read book 2, was scarred for life, but I freaking loved it. So I went ahead and purchased this one, and I still need to read it. But in the first one we meet Rin, and she is an orphan, but she was adopted by this horrible couple that basically deals with like drugs and stuff. And Rin decides to study really hard to get into this military academy to be able to learn how to fight, how to use magic and everything like that. And there's wars coming. Wars. So yeah, it was really kick-ass, the first 2 books. I really need to get to this one. And then we have book 2 and 3 in this series called Of Blood and Bone. So we have A Time of Blood and A Time of Courage by John Gwen. I read the first book earlier this year and I really loved it. These books takes place after the Faithful and the Fallen series, which was my favorite, one of my favorite adult fantasy series by now, honestly. But in this series we follow the Benalim, which are basically like the angels, or however you want to see them, being at war once again with the bad guys, the demons, and then the humans and the basically giants and all the other creatures being stuck in between. And you know, shit goes down, and this is like 100 or 200 years or something like that after the Faithful and the Fallen series, and we get to know a little bit what happened to those characters after the last book. So I really love that one. We also get some cameos. So going on to the second and the last shelf, I don't really have that much. We have The Iron King by Maurice Druon, which is supposed to be the original Game of Thrones, according to George R.R. Martin. I don't really know a lot about this one. There's supposed to be an Iron King, and he, you know, rules his country with an iron fist, but he cannot rule without his family because his sons are weak and their wives adulterous, and while his red-blooded daughter Isabella is unhappily married to an English king who prefers the company of men. And it's supposed to be a web of scandal, murders and intrigue that weaves itself together. So I really need to read this one. I have it for a while. And then we have The Black Sun by Rebecca Roundhouse, which I bought because my friend Jamie kept nagging on me to read it. But it says, a god will return when the earth and sky converge under the black sun. Honestly, that's all I need to know because I love stories with gods in them, and that sounds awesome. And now we have Dawn Shard by Brandon Sanderson. This is basically book 3.5 in the Stormlight Archive series, and I should have read this one before I read Rhythm of War, but I only had this book on Scribd on my phone as an ebook, and I didn't really like this format, so I didn't end up reading it before reading Rhythm of War, and I love that book, and I just need to read this one. But this is basically about Navani Colin, who sends a sort of expedition to this island to make sure it doesn't end up in enemies' hands, and this ship owner Ryzen Fattori, can't pronounce her name, has lost his leg but gained the companionship of Shiri, which is some sort of kind of extinct kind of animal, and when that gets sick they have to go to this island to make sure to get the medicine treatment that it needs, basically. So it sounds cool, and it's Brandon Sanderson, so I know I'm gonna love it. And then we have Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. I don't really like that it's paperback and they text is so small, which is probably why I haven't read it. But I think this is supposed to be a convent, and girls are supposed to be trained to have to become killers. And I mean, if that doesn't sound awesome, I don't know what does. And then we have The Emperor's Blades by Brian Stavely. So basically the Emperor has been murdered, leaving the Anorian Empire in turmoil, and now his progeny must prepare to unmask the conspiracy. His son Violent, training for the Empire's deadliest fighting force, hears the news an ocean away, and after several accidents and a dying soldier's warning, he realizes his life is also in danger. Yet, before Violent can act, he must survive the mercenaries' brutal final initiation. And then we have the Emperor's daughter, Minis Adair, who hunts her father's murder in the capital, and there's court politics that may turn up to be deadly, and it sounds cool, and read it. Now we actually have more Brandon Sanderson, believe it or not. But this is Arcanum Unbounded by Brandon Sanderson. This basically has a lot of short stories in it, sort of novellas in between books in different series. So there's actually a lot of different series in here. I have read some of them because I have like the hardcover edition of those short stories. So like the Reckoners novels and the Mistborn novels, like stuff like that I've already read, so technically I don't need to read the entire book because I've already read some of them. Now we have another book that I think everyone will recognize, and that is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. And I've kind of not picked it up just because I know that the third book is nowhere near being published, and that's people's, you know, big complaint about this series, and I just don't want to read the book series just to find out that like third book is not out, so I have to wait for 5 more years and then we'll read it anyways. So that's why. I don't really know what it's about, but I think there's supposed to be gods and stuff like that. And then we have The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter, and there's supposed to be dragons in it and a war, and one young man will become his people's only hope for survival. I have a book that was actually really looking forward to reading, and this is The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. I think the second book is out now, or possibly on its way out this year, but anyways, should have read it. We have Princess Malini, who dreams of vengeance after her despotic brother trapped her within the crumbling walls of an ancient temple. And then we have this maidservant Priya, who's forced to disavow her power and her birthright because of her past. And dreams of freedom. In a world beset by wild magic and turbulent uprising, their destinies will become irrevocably tangled, and together they will set an empire ablaze. That sounds freaking amazing. But then we have Promise of Blood by Brian McCallan. This is book 1 in the Powder Mage trilogy, and blurred by Brandon Sanderson, so it's promising. He said, just plain awesome. I like that. But it says, the age of kings is dead, and I have killed it. It's a bloody business overthrowing a king, but amid the chaos a whispered rumor is spreading. A rumor of a broken promise, omens of death, and the gods returning to walk the earth. I feel like there's a lot of adult fantasy where gods are supposed to return, but I'm here for it, honestly. I only have 3 more books to talk about. And this is She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Shawn. And I think this is supposed to, yes, it's a historical fantasy. This took place in China in 1345, and they're under a harsh Mongol rule, and for peasants, greatness only appears in stories. So in the Su family, we have their son Su Shangba, and he is believed to reach success, while their daughter is expected to die very early on, because that's what basically the prophecy said. But then it turns out that it is the son Su that actually dies during a bandit attack. He dies during a bandit attack, and their parents die and everything. And when the brother dies, it is actually his sister who steals his identity to enter the monastery. And disguised as a male novice, she learns she can be ruthless to avoid her faith, but when her sanctuary is destroyed, she's cast back into the war-torn world. To change her ending, there's only one thing she can do: claim a brother's great destiny as her own. So that sounds kick-ass, and I really need to read this. Now we only have 2 books left. So we have The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. This is the first book in the Lecanius trilogy, if that's how you pronounce it. Don't really know much about this one either, but it says, as destiny calls, a journey begins. It has been 20 years since the godlike augurs were overthrown and killed. Those who once served them, the gifted, were spared only after accepting the rebellion's 4 tenets, which vastly limited their powers. Davion suffers the consequences of a war lost before he was even born. When he discovers that he wields the forbidden power of the augurs, he sets into motion a chain of events that will change everything. To the west, a young man whose fate is intertwined with Davion's wakes up in a forest, covered in blood, and with no memory of who he is. And in the far north, an ancient enemy begins to stir. Like, seriously, all of these books sound so good! I just need to get back into reading properly fast, and then I will hopefully plow on through a couple of these. I just feel like middle grade romance, contemporary mood. But the last book, which was kind of a complete fail, this is The Hunger of the Gods by Gwen. This is the second book in the Bloodsworn series. I don't own the first book because I accidentally bought the second book instead of the first book. We're not gonna talk about it. Anyways, so don't really want to read on the back because I will spoil myself, but I know this is supposed to be like Norse-inspired fantasy packed with myth, magic, and bloody vengeance. That's all I know. I love Gwen's other books. He's really good at like world building, magic building, character development is amazing. His books are always really kick-ass. Not only the guys, but the female are kick-ass as hell. So I just really need to pick up the first book so I can read this. So yeah, those were all of my adult fantasy books that I have not read yet. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video because I'm planning to go through my entire TBR for different genres if you're interested. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this one and I hope we see each other in the next one. Bye!